Antonosyan project. And our team has been working on putting together a report on regenerative agriculture and resilient food systems. This report will address how long-term land use practices documented through archaeology, history, paracology, and traditional knowledge can contribute to climate restoration and mitigation strategies in alignment with UNFCCC priorities. The aim of the report is to highlight the relevance of indigenous and local practices such as soil and biodiversity enrichment, forest management, water harvesting, and resilient crop systems for achieving climate and food security tasks.
Great. And we are joined with one of our Voices of the Global South participants, Edson Krenak, and I'll let him introduce himself, and then we'll dive into the interview.
Hi, thank you for having me. My name is Edson Krenak from Krenak Peoples in Brazil. I am finishing a PhD research at Vienna University and also work for an organization US-based called Cultural Survival, which work is focused on support indigenous people's rights and self-determination. And also I work at the executive committee at Surge Coalition. Which Surge stands for Securing Indigenous People's Rights in the Green Economy, dealing with issues of just transition minerals, and the impact of these new not so new mining on indigenous peoples and traditional communities, territories.
Thanks a lot, Edson. Thank you for accepting our invitation and taking time for the interview. And I'll start with the first question. And we were wondering, how do you see heritage management and territorial management working together to help keep ancestral knowledge alive?
From the perspective of indigenous peoples, because there are two perspectives here to see territorial management. It's to heritage management and territorial management. There are the perspective of indigenous peoples and perspective of the government, states, agencies that deal with indigenous knowledge. And unfortunately, there is a we call it abyss, but can be also called a crossroads. Indigenous peoples don't feel safe. I can say almost all of the world. I say legally, socially, culturally safe in their territories to protect their heritage, because the state, the government, the corporations, they represent a threat many times, instead of protecting, guaranteeing the security and the protection of indigenous heritage and territories. They are actually trying to transform these territories and commodities, transform this heritage in kind of put that in a trading market. And I can give you an example. When indigenous people have some food practices of, let's say, their diet is based on fish, on certain hunting games, is based on knowledge of herbs and vegetable from the forest. When the state doesn't guarantee the protection of this environment, the indigenous communities suffer a huge impact, not only from the climate change, but state projects, cooperation projects like mining, deforestations, that if it doesn't affect directly their territories, affect indirectly their territories. Then they lose access to traditional food sources. They lose the ability to protect this heritage to the next generation, for example.
Very interesting. In along these lines, it sort of reminds me of a part of your presentation. A lot of things were interesting for me, but one of them was you mentioned knowledge as an experience and a connection. So it sort of leads into my next question here is if you could potentially share your thoughts on how communities might sustain and pass on cultural knowledge about the environment and about resilient food systems.
Uh, well, I will use again the word territory because territory is the heart of indigenous system knowledge. The land is the heart of their heritage because there's no knowledge without land. There's no knowledge without territory. There's no indigenous heritage, ceremonies, knowledge systems without the territory. We live to learn the land, what some have called the land pedagogy, the land teachings, because the territory is not a commodity, a property, a possession, but it's a living archive of from our ancestors. The territory is the geographic knowledge applied from these ancestors that bring to what we our practices, our ceremonies, our ways to to fight and to defend the territory. Uh, the resilience of indigenous communities can be also translated into care and protection. We cannot be resilient if the territory is not resilient or cared as well. That's why the priority, the number one priority of indigenous peoples when they are defending their knowledge, their food system, their rights is the defense of the territorial rights. They have to have first the territory demarcated, uh, in some areas to have the titles, to have the right to tenure management, governance, and to have these rights in the territorial demarcation secured by the state, who is the one by international law, by national law in Brazil, in Peru, in Canada, in many places. The state has the obligation to protect indigenous peoples' territories as well. We say that the fight for the land is the mother of all fights. And then when we talk about resilience, we are talking about uh, a knowledge or resilience or heritage. We are talking about a knowledge that is holistic. Uh, the land is not only a geographical resource source or space, but it's biocultural space. We see our rights or our territories as a biocultural space where we don't possess, own the resources, but we have a relationship with this territory, and then we exchange uh, gifts of this relationship. There's no resource. The word resource, the word development, and many other words that the state used to frame indigenous territories, they are unfamiliar. They are colonizing actually terms because indigenous peoples, they don't have these terms to define their relationship with their heritage, the food system, and the territory. This is holistic. This is all interconnected, and we can the only way we found to protect it and to enjoy it is through autonomy, to if we have our governance systems in place and protected. We don't want, for example, a mining company coming and impact our governance, our food systems, because they are mining for the just transition, mining for any other type of green solution, while they are contaminating our rivers, killing our fish, stressing the environment around with explosions, with the sort building logistic infrastructure for these so-called resources from our lands. Then we defend the territory, as I mentioned before, as the main policy, the main action to defend our food systems and our heritage.
Thanks a lot. I think you covered next question a bit, but maybe if you could give more details on how policy agenda can better support the respectful management of ancestral territories, and specifically how indigenous actors would play, what kind of, and how the role of indigenous actors in this process would be.
Well, most of the policy and legislation and interaction from the state, civil society, and corporations with indigenous peoples are based in two main words. You can scan all the discourse and narratives and documentations about that. It's recognition and consulting, as it was enough to protect indigenous peoples. Then we, of course, the recognition is the first step. We have been fighting for recognition of our rights, our existence, and the importance, the role of indigenous knowledge and governance to protect biodiversity, to fight climate change, to advance what's called the green agenda. We have been fighting for this recognition. We have achieved some progress has been done in terms of recognition. We have in the context of the UN Forum on Climate Change, we have the platform of indigenous peoples and the local communities, for example. We have the last IPCC report recognizing the role of indigenous peoples' knowledge in fighting climate change, in fighting the food insecurity that the entire world is living. Because food security is not only having the food, but having the healthy food, protecting the sources of healthy food, because the industry has sequestrate. They have like kind of a change the frame of what is food security. They frame it as a market issue. If you have a grocery, if you have a supermarket, market store close to your home, you are safe in terms of food. But they don't question, or they don't say, they don't talk, many people don't question what type of food is being selling there. How healthy, healthy and safe is the supply chain to extract this food and bring to the grocery in Europe, in America, in many places in so-called global north. Then I can give you one example. It's in the media in Brazil, in many places. There is in the Amazon, many rivers, they are facing not only the impact drought, longer drought than ever in history, but also the contamination of fish through due to heavy metals used by industry, mining, etc. One example is the level of mercury in 17 is fishes like in from the Amazon, fish that exported not only to Brazilian cities but to many places in Europe. The level of mercury is from 6 to 10 times higher than what is considered safe by the, for example, American Association of Food, is a state agency. I could give you many examples. The soy, for example, is another one that the industry fought for to not track the origins of the soy in Brazil, for example. They were able to suspend a soy moratorium that would keep the soy safe, or in other words, the soy would come from regions that there's no deforestation, but they were able to end this moratorium, and many actors, state corporations in the food supply chain, they can produce soy in deforested areas. And then what the indigenous peoples are doing, they are fighting these corporations in their own capacity, almost alone, because we almost don't see universities, academic institutions, and other actors in the civil society fighting these dirt sources of food. And we wanted to move from recognition to full participation in the processes of policy making, decision making levels, at multiple levels. We wanted to be to move from consulting and stakeholders position to rights holders position, and to have these rights protected. For example, we don't want to see our mechanism to secure this recognition and participation, it's called FPIC, or free prior informed consent, being misused by companies, states, and other actors as just a consulting mechanism. It's not. It's a consent, is a right to give or withdraw consent. It's also, as I described in many papers, is free because should never be used under any threat, any coercion, any like one single alternative offered to indigenous peoples. Either you accept it or this, or you accept this because we are coming. And then they try to destroy, to undermine this right by taking this free aspect from the indigenous peoples. When this is respected, we go to the informed, because it's a free, prior, and informed consent. No, the biggest issue today, it is almost an irony. We live in a information society. We are intoxicated by the amount of information we can access today. But this information we can access, unfortunately, is very, very shallow. It's being framed, it's being owned, and it's being like misused by big techs, by governments, to prevent people, indigenous peoples, to have access to the real important information, technical information about the impact of these policies, the Green Deal policies, the green economy policies, the green energy. I'm using these terms all under between quotes, because these terms are not from indigenous people, from those who are violating our rights. They name it with this grammar of green to justify mining, deforestation, and impact on indigenous peoples' territories. Then what the information we receive is, for example, this mining of lithium, cobalt, or copper or nickel is to produce clean energy, but it's only clean in some areas in the global north. It's clean in the final users, but if you uh, go to the indigenous people's territories, where more than 50%, more than 54% to be precise, is a number given by the World Bank, by the magazine Nature, for many other important international agencies, that more than 54% of the transition minerals are placed on indigenous territories or near indigenous territories. And the extraction of these minerals is very, very dirt, and it's contaminated the entire supply chain. And then what we see in the global north, a person very happy with their own not well-informed conscience, using an electric car, thinking I am contributing for the climate issues. But this person is not well-informed. And also on the other side, indigenous peoples and communities are not well informed about the real impact of these extractions and on their territories. When the companies and the states send reports about these, or assessment reports about these impacts, they send in a not appropriate manner. They send in foreign languages or very technical terminology, very difficult to read, thousands of pages of material that indigenous people would need months to read, to study, to understand before taking a decision to give a consent. But they are forced to consent in few weeks without a proper process. Then the principle of being prior this consent is violated because they don't have enough time to prior to the activity, to the extraction, to have any really well-informed decision. That's why we wanted to move this voluntary mechanism for many states, because few states signed the ILO, the International Labor Organization Convention 169, which is the one that prescribes the FPIC, and also the indigenous peoples, the UN Declaration on Indigenous Peoples' Rights. The governments and the companies, they see those mechanisms as just a voluntary. And on the other hand, we see that these, when you don't respect these mechanisms, they are violating not only indigenous people's rights, but also the food security of these communities. They are violating the also the rights of all societies, the entire humanity, to live in a healthy environment, which means to have access to a healthy water, to a healthy food, to a healthy well-being. Then we are being undermined without access to real information. Yeah, and then we could talk a lot about how indigenous peoples actors are fighting for that, but it's really, we want to engage in processes that are not greenwashing anymore. Greenwashing our food security, greenwashing our rights, greenwashing our capacity to build resilience in a climate crisis we are living in. This is our challenge.
Mm-hmm. Yes, the exploitation of food-rich lands and transition to food deserts with inequitable access to healthy foods is definitely extremely prevalent. And what you mentioned, that sort of subtle advertisement of greenwashing with what environmentally conscious electric vehicle without the realization of the repercussions to the land and to indigenous lands to make that vehicle is something that should not be understated, and it's definitely a direct result of the government and government policies. And sort of in that lines, you mentioned a few times about defending food system and heritage. And I imagine this defense would be sort of what you mentioned in your presentation. You said activism as a method to reforest politics. That message really stuck with me, and I think it applies to this next question. As an Indigenous scholar, how do you envision Indigenous perspectives shaping the future of research and policy making? And then what changes or practices would you like to see?
Thank you for the question, for mentioning that in my conference talk. First, I would like to perhaps give another line on this metaphor we are using to in our activism and policy, a foresting policy, foresting space. Now, of course, there are indigenous peoples from the Arctic, from the waters, from other biomes, but since I come from a biome that has three very I come from an area is an intersection between three biomes. These three biomes, they have very unique forestry. The Atlantic forest, the Caatinga bioma is a unique from Brazil, and the Cerrado is kind of a savanna-like uh, uh, forest or landscape. These forests, like the Amazon rainforest, they deeply depend on safety, regulation of the weather, the climate, and the environment. They are ecological hubs, which means they depend on each other. You cannot isolate one forest and think this will be resilient and will be sustainable. If we destroy everything around it, if you contaminate the river, if you deforestate several parts of this forest, especially the buffer areas close to the borders areas of this forest, we will keep the forest, these reserves, these natural reserves concept, for example. And for indigenous peoples, this is a fundamental mistake to see these spaces are not interconnected. And the foresting policies is to understand that the policies should not target one single thinking aspect. The policies we wanted to see being decolonized or forested should have more participation of indigenous peoples. I will give you two examples or two justification for why we need more indigenous peoples actors and in the spaces of policy making and decision making spaces like the UN. We have a space, but I will criticize this space in a minute. The first reason is because our livelihoods, our knowledges, our knowledge systems, our ways of, as we like to say, our ways of being, ways of knowing, ways of doing, don't harm the environment, don't create an unhealthy place to live. We don't represent a threat to life, to the next generations. We have a deep compromise with the past generations, our ancestors, and we, as we like to say in a strong slogan, we think 7 generations ahead. We are thinking always about what kind of a heritage, legacy we are going to leave for the next generations. This is already enough to justify our participation. But the second one, the key element for climate resilience in the planet, in our planet, the planet that we all share, is is biodiversity. Biodiversity is the key element for any economic model. Without biodiversity, we don't have food. Without biodiversity, we don't have life conditions to really thrive. We will all die sick and disappear, as thousands of species disappearing in the last 50 years, 40, 4 or 5 decades, because of the threats on biodiversity. It's really we never seen in the plan, or at least registered in the planet history, the speed of loss of biodiversity, loss of species that we are seeing that in this very short and narrow time frame. It's a huge crisis, is a huge threat to life, to human life on the planet. And why I'm mentioning that? Because indigenous peoples are the champions of biodiversity protection. Some sources, they even say that indigenous peoples protect 80% of the biodiversity of the planet. I don't know more evidence about that, but I can give you one very strong towards this information. Where you find indigenous peoples on the planet, biodiversity there is 100% protected, and the environment is healthy. The environment is really thriving in many areas. If it's not because of outside threats and impact from the other society, but we cannot expect to reach the same results, or we cannot expect to reach different results practicing the same developing a paradigm. We are living in a capitalist industrial world. We see the planet still as a extractive source for our ways of living, for the majority society. And then what we wanted to see is a biocultural paradigm that transform the economic, scientific, and the cultural knowledges through indigenous people's protagonism. We can bring much more agency, much more solutions, much more proposals to the policymakers in the global stage, if we have more than recognition, just recognition. The UN, as I mentioned, I would criticize, for example, one platform, the UN platform on indigenous peoples and local communities. This, unfortunately, is most of a distraction to mess up how indigenous people's protagonists should be taken seriously in this space, because without indigenous people's status in the UN international level is defined. There is a huge legislation, norms, and clarifications about who are indigenous peoples, their practices, their self-determinations, their characteristics. But the legislation on local communities, it's completely vague, is not safe, has been used as a tool by many countries to undermine indigenous people's rights, because local communities can be any community in many countries. Few countries, I know just one, Brazil, because I have been studying this, that has a very definite norms and legislation defining the status of local communities. But in the vast majority of the UN parties, local communities can be a pro-industrial community, can be a community of miners, can be a community of people wanting to build factories and to want to deforestate area, to colonize the forest, can be any type of group or association, can be even like a group of people involved with trafficking animals. They can build a local community association and be part of these conversations. And then we are fighting to this link, to separate these two platforms at the UN level, at the UNFCCC, the Forum on Climate Change. We want to have a full and solid indigenous peoples platform. And then UN create another platform for traditional communities and local communities, but they have to talk to the states how to define that. This way, we can have clearly how the indigenous people's activism and the protagonism and participation and sovereignty and even, if allow me to say, indigenous people's diplomacy will propose real solutions for the crisis we are living, either food, water, climate we are facing. Because without that, gonna be more and more blah blah blah, very slow processes in the COP and the other UN conferences or other regional, national spaces where policies and supposed solutions are discussed.
Fantastic. I have one more question for you. I think the topic of food security and resilience in itself implies that there's periods of struggle, or there has to be some point of conflict, whether it be natural or imposed by colonial or anthropogenic um, um, forces. But one thing that struck me in your presentation as well, and maybe this can be some of your final messages to us here, is you referenced Robin Wall Kimmerer about moss, lessons we can learn about moss. I was wondering if you maybe wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about this and the connection to resilience.
Thank you. Thank you for this. Is a very sweet memory from this conference because moss is has been like a special topic for Krenak people, for me as a researcher of my people, because I discovered some old stories, traditional stories mentioning mosses, and then Robin Kimmerer, in her astonishing research and knowledge on that, it really came together as a powerful tool for us to rethink how we interact with the other societies. Because, well, let me go to your question, to the point. I think three aspects about moss and resilience, and this I could highlight. The first is the fact that we don't abandon our territories. As the moss, they don't abandon the territory. Even there, when there's no water, there's no light, they wait for, some mosses can wait for decades, for centuries, to receive again the light or the resources they need for that. They depend entirely, they trust the territory. They trust that other animals, other plants, other conditions will bring and provide life or nutrition from them. That's why some mosses, they are dormant for generations. And indigenous peoples, our insistence of the territory to build the resilience of the territory is the fact that we don't abandon that. We don't, we adapt. We use our dynamic, ever evolving knowledge to from our ancestors for our ideas of future, to create a sense of respect, of reciprocity with the territory. When we know the territory cannot give anymore, we give it to rest. We protect it. We wanted to use new technologies for this. We are using actually the mapping, GPS, and scientific research, how to restore, how to build new forms of forestry in areas that has been like impacted by industrialization, etc. This is, we adapt, we don't abandon the territory. This is one aspect. The second one is the mosses are known because they are not, they don't have roots, right? They have other ways to feed themselves, but they use surfaces as a, they use neighbors, they use other species, they use other species of mosses to feel safe, to protect themselves, and to grow as well. What I'm is it's kind of the foresting metaphor I'm also using. What we have to do is to create more alliances and network. I think we cannot afford anymore to live in silos or bubbles in our society. Sciences has to walk and create meaningful alliances with other knowledge systems, with other ways to engage with society. We cannot be seated in our the academic golden chair and wait. One day, people will come to us. We have the answers. We have to be more proactive. We have to be more courageous. Trust the knowledge we are building with alliances and networks. Connecting different knowledge systems is key to build resilience. It's how mosses they build their resilience. They understand the weather. They understand the climate change. They understand their when there is a type of moss, I will not remember here the technical or the names of them, but let's put all of them in this big, huge, and diverse family of mosses. There is mosses that there are mosses that they even change their gender to adapt when they realize they don't have enough alliances or network to grow. Then they change their gender because they've look, my network here, it's not really pro-life. I have to create not network for pro-life, pro-resilience. I have to collaborate with others by changing myself. That's why I wanted to challenge the sciences. I want to challenge governments and corporations and other sectors to build the resilience in a humble way. Be like a moss. If it's necessary, change yourself. Look around you. What is missing? What is in need? Create a powerful web of mutual support, collaboration, and shared learning, because it's what indigenous peoples are. For decades or maybe century, anthropology science saw indigenous peoples as stuck in time, frozen in their knowledge systems. But the more you know indigenous knowledge systems, the more you learn that we build our knowledge system by sharing knowledge, by creating a network of knowledge systems. We never stuck in time. And the last I think aspect is the fact that resilience is a call to be humble. That we are in a society that think technology, especially the digital, these heavy industrial technologies and scientific knowledge will solve everything. Will not. Indigenous peoples are advocating for that as well. There are other forms of technology and knowledge that can bring game-changing knowledge and practices into our society. And well, perhaps I can add a one-fourth aspect of this most knowledge and resilience is the fact that indigenous peoples use rituals and ceremonies to connect with our planet. Rituals and ceremonies teach us about the respect we have, with the relationality we must build with the planet. Sometimes I hear societies, actors in non-indigenous societies talking about the planet as we were two different entities, humanity and the planet. As we are just travelers from other civilization, from other planets, like we were aliens on this planet. So we came here to colonize and use everything. Then we go to another planet. I'm not far away from the reality when we see some big tech guys dreaming of building, colonizing other planets, building expensive technologies to go to other planets. This mentality is a cancer. Indigenous peoples, through rituals and ceremonies, they defend this coming back to our connection to the planet. We are part of the planet. We are a planet. We are bioma, as the indigenous women in Brazil chant and cry. We are bioma. Then we are part of this planet.
Thanks a lot. You gave a lot of food for thought, and I really hope that our platform can help to bridge your critical ideas to scientists, policymakers, and other involved people. And before we end, is there something you would like to add? Maybe there was something we didn't cover in our questions that you think is important message to bring to people?
I think we covered I think enough. I just say thank you for the opportunity. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much.